Hey there, traveler. Before we begin, tell me, where in the world are you listening from tonight? Drop your city in the comments and maybe the time where you are right now. Let's see how far across the world this journey reaches. Now, take a slow, deep breath in and let it out gently. Let the noise of your day fade away. Just you, your thoughts, and time itself. For the next 2 hours, we're traveling far back to a world both familiar and completely alien, the heart of the Roman Empire. But this isn't about emperors or battles. No grand marble halls, no golden crowns. Tonight's story is about life itself, the heartbeat of dawn and dusk in the greatest city of the ancient world. Picture it. You walk through narrow, crowded streets, past market stalls glowing in the morning light. The air is thick with smoke and the scent of fresh bread. But it isn't for you. You live high above those streets, in a tall, creaking wooden building where the walls breathe and the floors sigh with every step. Below you, the city hums, restless and alive. This isn't the Rome from postcards. This is real Rome. Loud, smoky, chaotic, and beautiful. And for the next while, you'll see how hard it was to simply survive one day there. So, close your eyes, breathe in, and imagine waking to the creak of old timber, the distant chatter of voices below, and the heartbeat of a city that never truly sleeps. Ancient Rome. The day begins before sunrise. The insula, your apartment block, shudders faintly as footsteps echo from above. The wooden floorboards are uneven, the walls are thin, and somewhere beyond them, a baby cries. Your room smells faintly of smoke, oil, and damp linen. You've been sweating all night. The heat never truly leaves, even in the cooler months. You rise carefully from your straw mattress, brushing off crumbs and bits of dust. The room is small, barely wide enough to stretch your arms, and shared with others. There's no glass in the window, only a wooden shutter that opens onto the dark alley below. You hear the first sounds of the morning market, a donkey braying, the clang of metal pots, the muttered voices of men already at work. You pull on your tunic, rough against the skin, and step into the corridor. The air grows thicker as you descend the narrow staircase. Someone above you empties a clay chamber pot out the window. It splashes onto the cobblestones with a dull sound. You wrinkle your nose, but you don't say anything. Everyone does it. This is Rome. Crowded, alive, indifferent. At street level, it's still dim, but the scent of bread seeps from the bakery at the corner. The baker has been awake since midnight, feeding his oven with logs and floury dough. If you have a few coins, you might buy a small loaf, dense and dark, flecked with bits of husk. If not, you will settle for what's left from yesterday, a hard piece dipped in cheap wine. To soften it, the streets grow busier by the minute. Vendors shout over one another, fishmongers, butchers, fruit sellers. Their carts rattle over the uneven stones. The smell of olives and salted fish mingles with smoke and sewage. The Tiber River lies not far away, carrying refuse downstream and back again. Imagine walking through it all, shoulder to shoulder, with people from every corner of the empire: Greeks, Syrians, North Africans, slaves, merchants, beggars. 100 tongues, 1,000 stories, but none of them really matter to the city itself. Rome is too vast to care about the lives it swallows. You're one of the poor, a plebeian, maybe even a freed slave. Your rent takes most of your income, and your landlord rarely repairs anything. The insula creaks dangerously in the wind. Fires are common. One stray spark could consume your home in minutes. You sleep lightly, always half ready to run, and yet life continues. You go to work, perhaps hauling goods from the docks, cleaning baths, or carrying water from the fountains. You labor until your back aches, until the sun stands high above the forum as marble statues, symbols of power you will never touch. You hear speeches in the distance, the voices of senators and orators, but their words aren't for you. They belong to another Rome entirely, the Rome of power, politics, and polished marble. By noon, the heat presses down like a weight. Shadows shrink, and the city seems to hum with tired energy. You find shade beneath an awning, sharing space with a dozen others. The smell of sweat and oil thickens the air. Someone nearby chews on figs. Another sleeps sitting upright, his head bobbing softly with each breath. In the afternoon, the streets fill with animals and carts again. Children run barefoot through puddles. A group of slaves passes by, carrying baskets of grain to the mill. One of them hums quietly, a low, steady rhythm that blends with the city's heartbeat. As the day wears on, the tension never really fades. You keep an eye out for guards, for thieves, for trouble. Crime is everywhere, but punishment is swift and cruel. A wrong word to the wrong man could end your life in the marketplace, and no one would stop to ask your name. Still, as dusk settles, something softens. The sky turns gold and pink above the rooftops. You sit on a low step, tearing at a loaf of bread, and watch smoke drift lazily from a dozen ovens. Children laugh somewhere nearby. The air cools. For a brief moment, Rome feels almost peaceful, but the peace never lasts. As night falls, the city changes again, louder, darker, unpredictable. You light a small oil lamp, its flame flickering weakly. Voices rise and fall outside. Drunks, lovers, strangers wandering home. You close the wooden door and listen to the murmur of it all, the living pulse of the greatest city on earth. And as you lie down, staring at the dim ceiling, you realize you've survived one more day in Rome, exhausted, hungry, uncertain, but still here. That's the rhythm of their lives. Relentless, vivid, human. And tomorrow, it will begin again. Before the sun has even risen, the emperor, who wanted to be a god. Caligula's reign of madness. The night fades, and with it, the clamor of the city seems to dissolve into something quieter, colder. You find yourself standing before the marble steps of a palace that glows faintly in the early dawn. The air here feels different, still, heavy with expectation. This is the Palatine Hill, where emperors dream, plot, and command the lives of millions. And somewhere within those vast, silent halls, a young man is stirring from uneasy sleep. His name is Gaius Julius Caesar Augustus Germanicus, but the world will remember him by another name, Caligula, the boy who watched power. Imagine a child surrounded by soldiers. He wears a miniature soldier's outfit, a tiny pair of boots, caligae, from which his nickname is born, Little Boots. Caligula. He is adored by his father's men, the great general Germanicus, whose victories expand Rome's reach far into the wilds of Germania. But childhood under empire is never truly innocent. Caligula's early years are marked by exile, rumor, and death. His father dies suddenly. Some whisper it was poison. His mother is accused of treason and banished. His brothers are imprisoned, one by one, and executed. And the boy, still barely more than a teenager, learns the first great lesson of Roman politics. To survive, one must smile at those who would kill you. The young emperor. Years pass, and the boy becomes a man, cautious, clever, handsome. When the old emperor Tiberius finally dies, the Senate hails Caligula as a savior. He's young, charismatic. The people love him instantly. Coins are struck with his face, garlands hung across the city. For a time, it seems Rome has entered a new golden age. He lowers taxes, frees prisoners, hosts games and feasts that stretch long into the night. The people cheer his name in the streets, and for a brief, shining moment, the empire feels almost kind. But kindness doesn't last long in the halls of power. Something shifts, slowly, almost imperceptibly at first. A fever, a sickness. Historians tell us that Caligula fell ill only months after taking power. He recovers, but not entirely. Something inside him seems altered. The man who once smiled now speaks of himself as divine. He begins to dress, not as an emperor, but as a god, sometimes as Jupiter, the king of the gods, sometimes as Apollo, the radiant one. He orders temples to be built for his own worship, demands sacrifices in his honor, and insists that statues of himself be placed in sacred spaces. In the stillness of the night, his guards whisper to one another, afraid to speak too loudly. They say he hears voices, that he laughs alone in empty rooms, that he tests the loyalty of his closest allies with cruel, unpredictable games. The theater of power. Power in Rome was never simple. It was both divine and dangerous, a living performance that required belief. Caligula understood this, and perhaps he leaned too far into it. He turned the empire into a stage. He would summon senators and make them run beside his chariot. He would invite the noble families to dine, then mock their ancestors. He built grand projects, floating bridges across the sea, palaces of mirrored marble, only to tear them down again, claiming the gods had changed his mind. And all the while, Rome watched, half in awe, half in fear. Imagine standing in one of those grand banquet halls, the marble cold beneath your sandals, the light from hundreds of oil lamps flickering on the gold-trimmed walls. Caligula reclines on his couch, smiling faintly, his voice smooth as honey as he speaks of divine visions. Around him, courtiers laugh softly, though none dare meet his eyes. Every word is a test, every glance a gamble. To survive in Caligula's Rome is to live in constant performance, to pretend, to flatter, to hide your true thoughts deep within, and even then, safety is never guaranteed. The edge of madness. When an emperor believes he is a god, human life loses its meaning. He begins to act not as ruler, but as fate itself, granting and taking as he pleases. Some historians say he emptied the treasury to fund his games. Others say he declared war on Neptune, the god of the sea, ordering his soldiers to gather seashells as trophies of victory. It's hard to know what's true. Centuries blur truth and rumor together like watercolors bleeding on parchment. But one thing remains certain. By the end of his reign, the laughter that once greeted his name had turned to silence. The Senate feared him. The people resented him. Even his guards began to whisper. And one evening, in the quiet corridors of his palace, they acted. A small group of men, his own bodyguards, waited in the shadows. When Caligula passed by, they struck quickly. By the time the echo of footsteps faded, the emperor, who thought himself a god, lay still. He was 28 years old. Reflection: it's easy, from the distance of centuries, to see Caligula as madness given form, a tyrant, a monster. But if you listen closely, beneath the stories, there's something else. A boy who grew up surrounded by fear, a man who never learned the difference between love and obedience, an emperor who believed, perhaps desperately, that he could become untouchable, divine, if only he convinced the world to believe it too. The city moved on. It always did. The marble steps were cleaned, the palace repopulated. The next emperor rose, and the people cheered again. History rolled forward, steady as ever. And yet, if you were to walk those same halls tonight, in the quiet glow of the moon, you might still sense something lingering there. A whisper of ambition, a faint echo of laughter, and the cold, lonely grandeur of a man who once believed he was a god. But remember, God is only one. The hidden rooms, beneath the Colosseum. The roar of the crowd fades into silence. You find yourself standing at the edge of the great Colosseum, the Flavian amphitheater, one of the most recognizable structures in the world. By day, it was a monument to spectacle. By night, it becomes something else, still monumental, echoing with ghosts of applause long gone. Imagine it in its prime, 50,000 people pressed shoulder to shoulder, their voices rising like a tide, sunlight pouring over marble seats, the scent of dust, sweat, and oil hanging heavy in the heat. But tonight, we won't sit among them. We'll go beneath them, below the arena floor, into the labyrinth hidden from their eyes. The Hippodrome, Rome's underground machine. The Romans called it the Hypogeum, the underworld of the Colosseum, a network of tunnels, cages, and wooden lifts built to serve the greatest theater of life and death the world had ever seen. The air down here was thick and close. Torches flickered along damp walls, casting narrow bands of orange light. The sound of water dripping echoed endlessly, like a heartbeat. Imagine standing here, centuries ago. You can hear the muffled roar of the crowd above, thousands chanting, stamping their feet. The floor above you, made of heavy wooden planks covered in sand, creaks with movement. Slaves and workers rush past carrying ropes, pulleys, and levers. In the shadows, cages hold lions, leopards, bears, restless, pacing, their breath rising in slow, foggy clouds. Each lift and platform was an engineering marvel, a system of wooden elevators powered by men turning great winches. At a signal from above, the workers would pull, strain, and release. The platform would rise, slowly, smoothly, carrying its hidden cargo up through the floor. And then, the trapdoors would burst open. To the audience above, it seemed as if animals appeared by magic. One moment, the arena was empty. The next, a lion stood blinking in the sunlight. They never saw the sweat, the fear, the countless human hands that made the illusion possible. Down here, everything was choreographed. Every rope, every counterweight, every breath was part of a vast, unseen performance. The audience saw only the final moment, the clash, the spectacle, the roar. But for the men below, this was daily life. Hot, loud, endless work in the dark. The smell of animals, of oil and wood, of smoke from the torches. and above it all, the faint, rhythmic chant of a crowd that would never know their names. The ritual of the games. For Rome, the games were more than entertainment. They were ritual, a way to remind the people of Rome's power, its reach, and its order. Every event followed a strict rhythm. The morning hunts, the midday executions, and the grand spectacles of the afternoon. Even death was arranged like theater, precise and deliberate. The emperors, seated in their gilded box, presided as both hosts and gods. Their gestures could mean life or death. A thumb raised, a thumb turned, gestures that controlled fate. But what did it feel like to be there, in that space between? The worker below, waiting for a signal. The gladiator, kneeling on the sand, squinting into the light. The lion, restless in its cage, unaware of the world it was about to enter. In the cool air beneath the arena, those lives met, briefly, violently, inevitably. The corridors carried every sound, the rattle of chains, the whisper of commands, the thud of wood against stone. And then, after it was over, the silence returned. Even in ancient times, people wondered at the cost. How much blood did Rome need to prove its greatness? How many lives were spent in service of its glory? The answers were never written down. The rediscovery centuries passed. The empire fell. The Colosseum was looted, repurposed, and left to ruin. Grass grew over the stone. Birds nested in the arches. The underground was forgotten, sealed away by time and debris. For more than 1,000 years, no one walked those tunnels, until archaeologists began their patient descent in the 19th century. Torch by torch, shovel by shovel, they uncovered the maze again. They found fragments of machinery, rusted iron hooks, and deep grooves in the stone where ropes had once pulled. They discovered walls scratched with faint marks, names, prayers, maybe confessions from the men who worked in the dark. Even traces of paint remained on the walls. Dull reds and ochres, faded by centuries of damp air. Every discovery was a whisper from the past, small, human, fragile, and in the stillness of those rooms, archaeologists said they could feel the weight of time pressing close. It wasn't frightening, exactly, just heavy, the sense that millions had watched, lived, and died above these same stones. The silence beneath now. When you visit the Colosseum at night, the hypogamy stands open again, lit by soft, artificial light. The air smells faintly of earth and dust. The voices of tourists fade into the distance until there is only the sound of your footsteps on stone. You can look down the long corridors, the wooden platforms reconstructed above, and almost hear the ghosts of motion, the slow creak of pulleys, the faint rush of sand falling from a lifted platform. It feels peaceful now, in its way, the violence long gone, the mechanisms still and quiet. Imagine standing there in the cool darkness. You breathe in. The air feels ancient. Somewhere above, the moonlight filters through the open arches, silvering the dust. This place, once filled with shouts and blood and glory, has become something else entirely. A monument not to death, but to endurance. Stone, after all, remembers. It holds the echoes of every footstep, every whispered command, every heartbeat that once passed through its halls. And in that deep, steady silence, you can almost feel time itself exhale. The Roman elite, baths, feasts, and the pursuit of perfection. You climb back to the surface, out of the dark tunnels, and into the golden light of a Roman afternoon. The air smells of olive oil and hot stone. You can hear laughter echoing through marble courtyards, fountains splashing in the distance. This is where power lived, not in the arena, but in the villas that watched over it. A world built for the few. Picture this: a sprawling marble villa, perched on the Palatine Hill, overlooking the city below. White columns gleam in the sun. Peacocks stroll lazily through the gardens. Slaves move silently, carrying trays of fruit, scrolls, and wine. Inside, the air is cool, perfumed with incense and rose water. Mosaics shimmer beneath your feet, each tile arranged by hand. Every corner whispers wealth. This is the world of Rome's upper class: senators, generals, and the emperor's circle. Men who believed themselves chosen by the gods. They didn't just live in Rome, they were Rome. Their mornings began not with labor, but ritual. A servant would bring warm water and scented oil. Another would read the day's news aloud, written on fresh wax tablets, and before noon, they would head to the thermae, the public baths. The baths, Rome's social media. Think of the Roman baths, like the ancient version of Instagram, LinkedIn, and Starbucks combined. Everyone who mattered went there. It wasn't just about getting clean. It was about being seen. The baths were massive, halls of marble and steam, echoing with voices. Hot pools, cold pools, massage rooms, and libraries lined the walls. Sculptures of gods and heroes watched as citizens discussed politics, gossip, and philosophy. The rich didn't come alone. They came with servants, perfumes, oils, and even personal trainers. They'd debate Cicero, mock rivals, or strike new business deals between dips in hot water. It was luxury dressed up as routine, but underneath it all, there was an obsession with control, image, and perfection. To the Roman elite, the body wasn't just flesh. It was a symbol of discipline and power. A soft body meant weakness. A sculpted one, dominance. Even in marble statues, emperors had themselves carved as flawless, ageless, muscular, divine. The message was clear. Rome doesn't age. Rome doesn't fail. Rome is eternal. The feasts. When excess became art, when the day faded, the city's true theater began. The Roman feast. Imagine walking into a candlelit hall. Walls painted with red and gold. Ceilings draped in silk. The air thick with music and roasted meat. Guests recline on couches, leaning on cushions embroidered with gold thread. Wine flows like water. Plates of figs, honey cakes, and roasted peacocks make their way across the room. Slaves stand silently in corners, ready to refill a cup before it even empties. And the talk? Politics, philosophy, scandal, poetry, all tangled together with laughter and sharp wit. Sometimes they'd hire actors or poets for entertainment. Other times, gladiators fought mini duels in private courtyards just to impress guests. It wasn't just a dinner, it was a performance of power. The more lavish the feast, the higher your social rank, and some went wild, using silver plates shaped like seashells, sprinkling edible gold on bread, or even serving food dyed purple, the color of emperors. To them, pleasure wasn't sin, it was proof that you'd won. The paradox of luxury. But behind all that glitter, something darker stirred. Writers like Seneca, one of Rome's greatest philosophers, looked around at this glittering world and felt sick. He said, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, that is poor." The elites had everything: power, beauty, gold, and yet they were haunted by fear. Fear of losing it, fear of aging, fear of being forgotten. That's why they built monuments, wrote their names in stone, and filled their homes with statues of themselves. They weren't chasing happiness, they were chasing immortality. But no feast lasted forever, no beauty stayed untouched, and one by one, even Rome's greatest fell silent. The marble cracked, the gold faded, and the same earth that held the slaves and gladiators also swallowed the emperors, echoes of the elite. Today, their villas lie in ruins, their baths are quiet, their mosaics faded. But if you walk through the ruins of the Palatine Hill at dusk, when the tourists are gone and the light turns gold, you can still feel it. A hum, a ghost of laughter, the echo of sandals brushing marble floors. It feels like the air itself remembers. The pride, the pleasure, the illusion that this life would last forever. Rome's elite believed they had mastered the world, but history whispered back, nothing you build can outlast time. When Rome burned, the fall, and the fire. The city sleeps under a blanket of warm summer air. It's quiet, almost too quiet. You can hear the soft rustle of linen curtains, the creak of wooden shutters, the faint bark of a dog in the distance, and then, somewhere near the Circus Maximus, a spark. No one knows how it started. A dropped oil lamp, a careless merchant, or maybe, as some whispered, divine punishment. But that spark found dry timber, oily rags, and straw rooftops, and within moments, the city that never stopped moving began to burn. The fire rises. Imagine it. The smell of smoke, sharp and bitter, drifting through narrow streets. A faint orange glow on the horizon. Someone opens a window, looks out, and feels the heat. The alarm spreads faster than the flames. Ignis! Fire! The cry echoes through the insulae, the crowded apartment blocks of the poor. Families scramble down narrow stairways. Mothers clutch infants. Men grab what they can. A pot of coins, a small statue of a household god. But the fire moves faster. The dry wood and tangle of roofs become ladders for the flames. And soon, the city becomes a living torch. From the Palatine Hill, you could see the sky itself, red and gold, the smoke twisting like ghosts. The sound of crackling timber mixes with screams, the bray of animals, the shattering of pottery, and beneath it all, the deep roar of the fire, like the breath of an angry god. For 6 days, Rome burned, and when the flames finally died, 2/3 of the city lay in ruins. Nero and the blame. At the center of it all stood Emperor Nero, or at least, that's what people said. Some swore he watched from his palace, strumming a lyre, singing about the fall of Troy, while his city burned. Others said he wasn't even in Rome when it began, that he rushed back and opened his gardens to the homeless. History still can't decide which story is true, but rumors spread faster than fire, and in the smoky ruins of the city, people needed someone to blame. Nero's answer was cruel. He accused a small, growing group, followers of a new faith, the Christians. They became the scapegoats, and soon, the city that had burned now burned with vengeance. But whether Nero was guilty or not, the fire changed him. He rebuilt Rome in his image, grander, wider, more organized, with marble streets and fountains of bronze. And at the heart of it all, he built his greatest dream, Domus Aurea, the Golden House, a palace so vast it covered acres, filled with gardens, lakes, and halls lined with a gold leaf. He had done what emperors always dreamed of. He turned destruction into power, but the people never forgot the flames, and whispers of his madness grew, life after the flames. For ordinary Romans, rebuilding was a slow, painful rhythm. The air still smelled faintly of ash. Blackened walls stood like skeletons. And yet, the markets reopened. Children played in the ruins. Life, stubborn as always, began again. New laws demanded brick instead of wood, wider streets, public fountains for water. Rome was learning, adapting, and maybe that's what made it so extraordinary. It burned again and again through fire, war, and time, but it always rose back up. There's a quiet strength in that, the rhythm of survival. The city might crumble, but the people kept going. The night after the fire, now imagine walking through the ruins at dusk. The ground still warm, columns cracked and fallen. The air smells of smoke and dust and rain. The city is silent, except for the soft hiss of embers fading in the dark. Somewhere, a woman hums to calm her crying child. A man kneels beside what's left of his home, tracing the outline of his doorway with his hand. And above it all, the stars. The same stars that watched Rome rise, burn, and rise again. That's the strange beauty of history. It teaches us that even the greatest empires can fall. And still, life finds a way through the ashes. Rome's fire didn't end its story. It simply changed it. From the ruins rose new emperors, new cities, and new dreams. And as the smoke cleared, another kind of power began to grow. Quieter, softer, and far from the palaces of emperors. Faith, philosophy, and the search for meaning beyond marble and gold. So, let's follow that spark. Not the fire that burned buildings, but the one that burned in minds. The idea of Rome itself. The rise of faith. How Christianity slowly conquered Rome. The year is somewhere near the 1st century after the fire. Rome is still the center of the world. Powerful, proud, and endlessly alive. But beneath the marble streets and grand arches, in hidden rooms and candlelit chambers, something small begins to grow. It begins not with armies or emperors, but with whispers, with gatherings in secret homes, with a shared meal, a prayer, and a symbol drawn quietly on the wall, a fish or a cross. The whispering faith. Imagine yourself walking through the Subura, one of Rome's poorest districts. It's night. Oil lamps flicker, and the air smells faintly of wine and wet clay. You pass a bakery, a workshop, a row of cramped apartments, and then, from behind a wooden door, you hear soft voices, a hymn, almost like a lullaby. Inside, there's no temple, no gold, no marble, just a few people sitting close together. A widow, a freed slave, a Roman soldier, now tired of war. They share bread and wine and speak of love, forgiveness, and a kingdom not of this earth. They don't call themselves Christians yet. That word comes later. For now, they're simply followers of the way. Their world is dangerous. To speak openly about their faith could mean prison, or worse. But still, they gather. Still, they sing. Still, they believe. The quiet spread. Faith, like fire, spreads in silence. A servant tells her master. A soldier tells his comrade. A mother tells her child. No one expects it to last, and yet it does. By the time the empire stretches from Britain to Egypt, the message has traveled with it, through trade routes, through travelers, through stories told by firelight. The temples of Jupiter still stand tall, the sacrifices still burn, The games still roar in the Colosseum, but slowly, something begins to shift. People begin to question the old gods. The old power feels heavy, cold, distant. And this new faith, it feels personal. It promises hope, equality, and eternal life. It's not the religion of the rich or the powerful. It's the religion of those who have little left but belief, and that makes it unstoppable. Persecution and perseverance. Rome, though, doesn't take kindly to new gods. For centuries, religion and politics are one and the same. To deny the emperor as divinity is to deny Rome itself. And so, the empire reacts with fear. The followers of the way are hunted, imprisoned, executed, thrown to wild beasts, burned in the gardens of emperors. And yet, they endure. Every attempt to destroy them only seems to make their faith stronger. Each martyr becomes a symbol, each loss, a seed. In the stillness of night, their names are whispered: Peter, Paul, Agnes, Sebastian. Ordinary people who became legends not through power, but through peace. From the catacombs to the palaces, centuries pass. Emperors rise and fall. Some cruel, some kind, some lost to history. But beneath their feet, the faith grows roots. In the catacombs, long tunnels carved into the earth, early Christians paint their walls with symbols of hope: doves, anchors, and the face of Christ as a shepherd. And then, something unimaginable happens. A Roman emperor sees a sign. The story goes that before a great battle, Emperor Constantine sees a vision, a cross in the sky, with words that say, "In this sign, conquer." He wins that battle, and in the years that follow, the empire that once hunted Christians begins to protect them. By the year 313, the Edict of Milan makes Christianity legal. The catacombs open, churches rise, and the faith that began in whispers now speaks in the voice of emperors. The transformation of Rome. The temples to Jupiter and Venus slowly empty. The sacrifices stop. The idols are replaced by crosses. Roman architecture remains: columns, domes, arches, but now they serve a different purpose. The same stones that once celebrated conquest now shelter quiet prayers. The pantheon, once for all gods, becomes a church. Even the language changes. The Latin that once shouted orders on the battlefield now recites prayers in candlelight. And so, the empire that once ruled the world becomes something new, not an empire of swords and soldiers, but of ideas and faith. A city of two worlds. By the 4th century, Rome is both ancient and reborn. You can still walk its marble streets and hear the echoes of the past: the clang of the blacksmith, the murmur of senators, the laughter of children. But above all, you hear church bells. The empire of stone becomes the empire of spirit. And though the political Rome will one day fall, its faith will endure, carried through centuries, whispered in every corner of the world. Feasts of empire, the decadent banquets of imperial Rome. The sun is setting behind the Palatine Hill. From the narrow streets below, you can hear distant laughter, music, and the rhythmic splash of fountains. The air is thick with perfume, crushed rose petals, myrrh, and the faint sweetness of spiced wine. You're standing at the gates of a villa, its marble walls glowing with the last golden light of the evening. Inside, Rome's most powerful men and women are gathering: senators, generals, courtiers, and the favorites of the emperor himself. Their sandals are jeweled, their robes woven with gold thread, their voices low and languid with the comfort of wealth. This is where Rome feasted while the rest of the empire toiled, entering the banquet imagined, stepping into the triclinium, the dining room. It's vast, lined with frescoes of gods and heroes. The air hums with the sound of harps and murmured conversation. You recline on a couch of silk and linen. Servants move like shadows, barefoot and silent in their hands. Silver trays carrying dishes that sparkle under the light of oil lamps. There's roast peacock glazed with honey, boar stuffed with dates and herbs, dormice rolled in poppy seeds, and figs soaked in wine. Each dish is more elaborate than the last, less about hunger, more about spectacle. This isn't dinner, it's theater. Every bite is a statement of status, luxury beyond reason. For the Roman elite, extravagance was a kind of art. They built fountains that poured not with water, but with rose water. They threw feasts where entire ships were dismantled for their marble. Some even sprinkled gold dust onto their food, just to say they could. It was said that Emperor Vitellius once held 3 feasts a day, and at each one, more than 2,000 different dishes were served. Others, like Lucullus, were known to dine alone with as much ceremony as if entertaining 100 guests. It wasn't just about taste, it was about control, power, the ability to turn the world into your pleasure. Even the plates had meaning. Carved ivory, colored glass, polished bronze. The way you ate spoke louder than words. The quiet servants and the watching eyes. But not everyone at the feast reclines. In the shadows stand dozens of slaves, pouring wine, fanning the air, collecting discarded bones. They do not eat, do not speak, do not rest. They exist to keep the illusion of perfection alive, and they see everything. The flirtations, the whispered conspiracies, the glances that could topple an empire, because here, politics are not fought in the Senate, but at the table. A raised eyebrow, a compliment too sweet, a seat too far from the emperor. Every gesture carries meaning. In this world, survival depends not on swords, but on subtlety, entertainment, and excess. As the night deepens, the feast becomes a performance. Musicians play soft melodies, dancers move like water, and poets recite verses of gods and lovers. Sometimes the emperor himself speaks, not as ruler, but as host. The lamps burn low, the scent of wine and smoke grows heavy, and still, the eating continues, course after course, each one stranger than the last. Jellyfish, flamingo tongues, snow carried from the Alps to chill their drinks. The guests laugh, toast, and pretend the world beyond the villa doesn't exist. The noise of the city, the cries of merchants, the clang of the blacksmith, feels like another universe. Here, time stands still. The aftermath of indulgence. When the last plate is cleared, the guests drift into the courtyard. Some lie on couches, gazing at the stars. Others whisper in the dark, plotting futures or recalling lost loves. The marble floor gleams with spilled wine. The fountains murmur softly, like distant conversation. For a brief moment, everything feels eternal. But even here, in this golden world, decay has already begun. The same excess that defined the empire begins to erode it. Luxury dulls ambition, comfort weakens resolve. The powerful grow complacent, while the edges of the empire crumble in silence. Rome's glory, like its banquets, cannot last forever. A slow fade. As you leave the villa, the scent of roses and smoke lingers on your skin. You walk past marble columns and into the quiet streets, where the air is cooler, cleaner, simpler. Behind you, laughter fades into echoes. The empire, too, will soon fade. Its gold will tarnish, its feasts forgotten, its villas turned to dust. But tonight, for this brief and shining moment, it is still alive, glittering, indulgent, and impossibly human. Transition to the final chapter, from the fire to the faith to the feasts. We've seen Rome at its brightest and its most fragile. But empires are not eternal, and the story of Rome must, like all things, come to an end. Next, we'll walk through the twilight, the slow, inevitable fall, not with chaos, but with the quiet crumbling of greatness. The fall of Rome, how an empire slowly fell. Asleep, the empire doesn't end with a crash, not with a single battle, a single betrayal, or a single emperor's death. It ends the way the tide retreats, inch by inch, soft and slow, until one day the shore is bare and silent. This is how Rome fell asleep. A city of echoes. It's the 5th century now. The streets that once roared with chariots and merchants are quieter. The fountains still run, but the marble is chipped. Vines curl around columns. Paint peels from faded walls. You can still hear life. The market cries, the blacksmith's hammer, the chatter of children. But there's something hollow beneath it. The energy that once pulsed through Rome has dulled. Taxes rise, trade slows, armies shrink, and in the vast distance of the empire, the borders tremble. Germanic tribes, once enemies, now walk through the same gates they once attacked, not as conquerors, but as settlers, soldiers, even rulers. Rome, the city that ruled the world, begins to forget what it means to rule. The machinery breaks. The Roman Empire was a machine, enormous, complex, and beautiful in its precision. Roads stretched for thousands of miles, legions marched in rhythm, laws governed from Britannia to Syria. But every machine, no matter how well built, needs oil, money, manpower, purpose, and Rome's supplies of all three begin to run dry. Gold drains to the east to pay for silk, spices, and peace. Farmers abandon their lands, swallowed by debt and war. The legions, once proud and loyal, are filled with mercenaries who fight not for Rome, but for survival. Even the Senate, that old heart of Roman pride, becomes a ghost of itself, more ceremony than power. And at the center of it all, emperors rise and fall, like waves, each promising to restore the glory that's already gone. The weight of comfort. Rome's fall isn't just about invasion or politics. It's about comfort. For centuries, life in the empire became easier, cleaner, safer, more predictable. The people forgot the hunger that built their world. The drive that once conquered nations now sank into luxury and routine. Public baths replaced training fields. Feasts replaced campaigns. Poetry replaced discipline. And yet, there's something hauntingly human about it. Civilizations don't collapse from cruelty. They fade from comfort. Even as the edges of the empire burn, people still bathe, still gossip, still host dinners by lamplight. The world ends not with fear, but with familiarity. The last defenders. Imagine standing at the city gates in the final years. The walls are old, patched, but still strong. The Tiber glitters in the distance. A few tired soldiers watch from the towers. Men from far-off lands, their armor mismatched, their eyes weary. They still call themselves Romans, even if they've never seen the old glory. Outside the walls, an army gathers. Not an army of monsters or demons, but of men. the Visigoths, hungry, desperate, and tired of broken promises. Their leader, Alaric, doesn't want to destroy Rome. He wants to be part of it. But Rome no longer knows how to share its power. And so, when the gates finally fall in 410 CE, it's less a conquest and more an ending, long overdue. The night Rome slept, the city burns again. But this time, no one rebuilds. The villas are looted, the temples crumble. The gold is melted down, scattered, lost. And yet, in the ruins, life goes on. A few candles still flicker in churches. Farmers still wake before dawn. Children still play among the stones. Rome doesn't die. It simply closes its eyes. The empire that never truly ended. Even as the Western Empire collapses, its spirit lingers. In Constantinople, emperors still sit on golden thrones. Roman law still shapes nations. Roman roads still guide travelers. And the Latin tongue, once the voice of empire, becomes the root of 1,000 future languages. Rome, even in its sleep, dreams of forever. Transition to what comes next. So, the empire sleeps, but its dream continues. And while the marble cracks and the banners fade, something new rises from its shadow. The small kingdoms, the monks, the stories that will shape the medieval world. From ashes to faith, from faith to legacy, Rome's echo will travel through centuries. Next, we'll step into that echo, to the quiet monasteries where knowledge survived the darkness, and the dawn of a new world began to glow. The keepers of knowledge, how monks saved civilization. When empires fall, it's easy to imagine everything turns to chaos. But history isn't just war and ruin, it's memory. And sometimes, memory hides itself away in silence, waiting to be rediscovered. This is the story of how the world's knowledge, philosophy, science, stories, faith, survived the darkness because of a few quiet souls who traded glory for ink and prayer. A silent world after Rome. The empire's collapse leaves behind a shattered landscape. No central power, no great armies. Roads fall into disrepair. Trade dries up. In many places, people forget how to build with stone, how to write, even how to read. The libraries that once held the words of Aristotle, Galen, and Virgil crumble to dust. And yet, far away from the ruins, in the green valleys of Ireland, on misty hills in Britain, deep within the Alps, men and women in robes begin to build something new. Not palaces, not cities, but monasteries, little islands of peace in a sea of chaos, the rhythm of monastic life. Imagine waking up before dawn. It's freezing. Your breath hangs in the air. The bells ring, soft but steady, calling you to prayer. The monastery is dimly lit, the stone cold beneath your bare feet. You walk silently through the corridors, past rows of candles flickering against walls covered in faint smoke. Every hour of your day is measured. Prayer, work, study, silence. You eat in quiet, sleep in simple beds, and spend your daylight hours copying words, letter by letter, on parchment made from stretched animal skin. You're a monk. You'll never see a city, never marry, never fight, but every page you copy might be the only reason the world remembers Homer, or Plato, or the Gospels. It's slow work, painful work, but it's sacred. The scriptoria, where time stood still. The scriptorium is the heart of every monastery, a quiet chamber that hums with scratching quills. Imagine rows of wooden desks, sunlight pouring through narrow windows, dozens of monks, hunched over, dipping quills into ink, tracing each letter with reverence. Sometimes they draw little decorations, vines, gold leaf, dragons, saints, turning every page into art. They copy everything. Religious texts, yes, but also science, philosophy, poetry, the old works of Rome and Greece. Without them, we'd have lost almost everything. It's hard to overstate how much of human history survived because of this patient labor. When people say the Dark Ages, they forget these quiet sparks of light, the Irish monks and the edge of the world. While most of Europe burned, Ireland became a sanctuary. Monks there, cut off from wars and politics, became obsessed with learning and beauty. They built monasteries on lonely cliffs, in icy coves, even on windswept rocks like Skellig Michael, where waves crashed below and seabirds cried overhead. There they created illuminated manuscripts, books so detailed they look like they were made by angels. The Book of Kells, the Lindisfarne Gospels, masterpieces of art and faith that still glow 1,000 years later. From Ireland, the monks spread out again, carrying books across Europe, reteaching what the world had forgotten, like messengers from another age, threats in the night. But their peace wasn't eternal. From the north came longships, the Vikings. They struck without warning, raiding monasteries for gold and slaves. Places like Lindisfarne and Iona were destroyed in hours. Books burned, relics stolen, the monks killed or scattered. But even then, they didn't give up. Survivors fled inland, carrying whatever manuscripts they could. The knowledge lived on, passed from hand to trembling hand. History survived because they refused to let it die. Charlemagne's Renaissance, fast forward to the 8th century. A new ruler rises. Charlemagne, king of the Franks. Unlike most warlords, he values learning. He brings monks into his court and orders the creation of schools and libraries. The Carolingian Renaissance begins, a flicker of light in the long medieval night. Monks become teachers, scribes, and advisors. They reintroduce writing, standardize Latin, and even reform how books look. The handwriting you're reading now, it traces back to the style invented in Charlemagne's monasteries. Carolingian minuscule. Without them, reading today might look like decoding ancient runes. The quiet power of patience. For centuries, these monasteries remained the quiet heartbeat of Europe. They healed the sick, fed travelers, taught children, and, most importantly, remembered. When kings rose and fell, monks kept writing. When plagues spread, monks kept praying. When wars burned cities, monks rebuilt from the ashes. They didn't chase fame or power. They chased preservation. Every candle in a scriptorium was a rebellion against forgetting, from faith to future. By the time the Renaissance dawned, Europe rediscovered the ancient texts that monks had hidden, copied, and cherished for centuries. Without them, Leonardo da Vinci, Galileo, and Newton might never have had the foundations they built upon. All of it, the science, the philosophy, the art, survived because a few thousand people in cold stone rooms decided that silence was worth more than gold. So as the world outside slept in darkness, they dreamed in ink. Transition to next segment, and when those dreams began to spread again, when cities returned, trade resumed, and kingdoms learned to write once more, something new awakened. The world began to rediscover its voice. But along with faith and knowledge came fear. Fear of sin, fear of heresy, fear of women witches, and the unknown. Next, we step into that world where shadows mix with faith and where being different could cost you your life. The witch trials, how fear gripped an age. The Middle Ages are fading, cities are growing again, printing presses hum. But in the quiet corners of Europe, something dark begins to stir, a whisper that spreads like smoke. Someone among us isn't human. The air of suspicion. Imagine a small village in the late 1500s. It's dawn. Mist clings to the fields. The church bell rings softly, calling the faithful. But underneath the calm, there's unease. A cow stopped giving milk. A child fell ill. A storm ruined the crops. And when people can't explain suffering, they look for someone to blame. In a world ruled by superstition, the strange and the different become dangerous. A woman who gathers herbs, an old man who talks to crows, a girl who dreams vividly. Soon, whispers turn to accusations. The birth of the witch craze. It begins quietly. A few local trials, some confessions under pressure. But then, in 1487, a book is printed in Germany. Malleus Maleficarum, the Hammer of Witches. It spreads fast, warning that witches walk among ordinary people, making secret pacts with the devil. The authors claim to teach judges how to identify them, how to question them, and how to destroy them. It's written with certainty, and that certainty is deadly. Over the next 2 centuries, thousands, mostly women, will be accused, tortured, and executed in Europe's attempt to cleanse itself of invisible evil. The interrogations. Picture a cold, windowless room, a wooden table, a candle burning low. A priest leans forward, his voice gentle but relentless. Who helped you call the storm? Whose mark do you bear? Sometimes the accused break quickly. Sometimes they hold out for days. But eventually, almost all confess, not because they're guilty, but because it's the only way the pain stops. Their words are written down, sealed, archived, becoming the stories that will feed the next wave of panic. The sound of fire and bells. When a village holds a witch trial, everyone attends. It's both punishment and theater. The church bells toll. The air smells of smoke and rain. Children watch from their father's shoulders. You can almost hear it. The crackle of the pyre, the murmured prayers, the wind carrying the ash, and then silence. Afterward, people go home feeling cleansed, but also uneasy. If evil could wear a familiar face once, it could again. Why it spread? The witch trials weren't just about fear. They were about control. Europe was changing fast. The church's power was being challenged by the Reformation. Old beliefs collided with new science. Women were beginning to assert small freedoms. And every shift made the world feel unstable. So when the ground feels like it's shaking, societies often look for a scapegoat. The witch hunts became a way to reassert order, to name an enemy you could see, even if she was your neighbor. The numbers behind the panic. Historians estimate that between the 15th and 18th centuries, around 50,000 people were executed for witchcraft in Europe. The majority were women, especially widows and healers. Germany, Switzerland, and Scotland saw some of the most intense hunts. But fear reached everywhere, even to small, isolated villages that barely knew the outside world existed. And yet, for every person accused, there were dozens who whispered, "It could be me next." A flicker of reason. By the 1700s, something begins to change. Science grows stronger. Philosophers like Voltaire and Locke challenge blind belief. Even churchmen start to doubt the old methods. Slowly, the panic burns out, not with a bang, but with exhaustion. The last known execution for witchcraft in Europe happens in the 18th century. The fires go out, the bells stop ringing, and the silence that follows feels different, not peaceful, just empty, the legacy of fear. Even now, the word witch lingers, sometimes in stories, sometimes in suspicion, but the real history behind it, the quiet terror that moved through villages, the lives lost to fear, remains one of humanity's deepest shadows. And yet, it also shows something strange, that even in its darkest chapters, the human mind keeps searching for meaning, even when that search leads us into the fire. Transition to next segment. But fear doesn't only shape faith, it shapes progress too. After the fires faded, a new kind of light began to rise. The light of discovery, curiosity, wonder, and soon, the world that had once feared witches would turn its gaze upward to the stars. The stargazers, how ancient astronomy rewrote the heavens. Long before telescopes, before science had names for things, people looked up and saw stories written in light. Each night, the same constellations drifted across the heavens. The same moon swelled and thinned. The same dawn always returned. And slowly, patiently, humans began to notice patterns, to count, to measure, to wonder. This is the calm heartbeat of early astronomy. The first observers. Imagine yourself lying on your back thousands of years ago, in a desert so quiet, you can hear your own pulse. The stars are bright enough to cast faint shadows. You're not thinking of science. You're thinking of seasons. When will the floods come? When should the fields be planted? The heavens become a calendar, a map, a clock. In Mesopotamia, priests mark the sky from atop ziggurats, vast stepped temples reaching toward the stars. They watch how Venus rises just before dawn, how the moon shifts a little each night. Their records, carved into clay, become the first star charts humanity ever made. Every flicker above has meaning. The gods are believed to move among them, shaping fate, warning of storms, blessing kings. And though it begins in superstition, something deeper is taking shape. Observation, Egypt and the rhythm of time. Further west, along the Nile, the sky becomes more than myth. It becomes a ruler's tool. The Egyptians, master builders of eternity, use the stars to measure the year. They notice that when Sirius, the brightest star in the sky, rises just before the sun, the Nile soon floods. That pattern never fails. So they mark it year after year. For centuries, temples align perfectly with celestial events, light cutting through stone on the solstices, marking time as precisely as a modern clock. The Great Pyramid of Giza, even after millennia, still points almost perfectly to true north. It's as if the builders wanted to anchor eternity itself to the stars. And when night falls over the desert, the pharaoh's soul, they believe, sails across the heavens on a boat of light. The Greeks and the shape of the universe centuries pass. Empires rise and fade. And then, in Greece, a new kind of wonder begins. One that asks not just what the heavens do, but why. Philosophers like Pythagoras, Aristarchus, and Aristotle watch the skies with quiet fascination. They calculate the Earth's circumference using shadows. They predict eclipses. They argue whether the sun or the Earth sits at the center of it all. In Alexandria, that glittering hub of knowledge. Astronomers like Hipparchus and Ptolemy catalog thousands of stars. They build models of the universe using spheres within spheres, a cosmic dance of perfect circles. Even if their math isn't perfect, their patience is. Each night, they sit in silence, recording the turning heavens, proof that curiosity can be an act of devotion. The heavens beyond belief. For centuries, humanity believes the heavens are divine, flawless, eternal, unchanging. But slowly, quiet cracks appear in that certainty. In the 16th century, Nicholas Copernicus sits alone in candlelight, staring at the same sky everyone else sees, but noticing something no one dared to suggest aloud. What if it's the earth that moves? He writes it down gently, cautiously. He doesn't publish it for years. When his book finally appears, it changes everything. Not in a flash, but like dawn slowly washing the world in light. The center of the universe shifts. The human ego trembles, and the stars become not divine ornaments, but destinations waiting to be understood. The telescope and the infinite. Then comes Galileo, impatient, brilliant, and endlessly curious. He points a new invention, a small telescope, toward the sky, and what he sees shatters the ancient perfection. The moon has craters, the sun has spots, Jupiter has moons of its own. The heavens, once thought eternal and flawless, are alive, flawed, changing, beautiful. He's accused of heresy, forced to recant, but his discovery can't be unseen. Once you've looked through the lens of truth, the old heavens never look the same again. Silence of the observatories. Centuries later, the quiet of stargazing remains. Even with all our technology, satellites, computers, radio telescopes, the act itself is still the same. A person, looking up, watching the sky move slowly. In that stillness, there's humility. We realize how vast the universe is, and how small, how temporary we are, but also how curious. That simple human urge to look up, to measure, to understand, it never sleeps. It's the same urge that built pyramids, wrote scrolls, aimed telescopes, and one day sent ships to the moon. The universe and the human mind. Astronomy began as superstition, became science, and ended as philosophy. Each time we thought we understood the cosmos, it grew larger and quieter. Even now, light from distant stars travels for millions of years before reaching us. When you look at them, you're seeing ancient history still unfolding. It's a strange comfort, the idea that the past is always shining somewhere above us. Transition to segment 12. From the cold marble of Roman temples, to the burning stakes of the witch hunts, to the vast silence of space, humanity keeps searching for meaning, and after staring into the stars for centuries, we turned our eyes back down, toward art, toward beauty, toward the soul. Next, we'll drift into a world of paint, music, and marble once more, where art became a language of light itself. The Renaissance dream, how art reawakened the human spirit. The Middle Ages had been a long, gray winter. The fires of faith burned brightly, but the colors of life had dimmed. Then, sometime around the 14th century, the world began to stir again. Not suddenly, not loudly, just softly. The Renaissance wasn't just an era of art. It was a slow, collective sigh of awakening, a rediscovery of beauty, of the human form, of curiosity, and of light. A new dawn over Florence. Imagine the first rays of morning falling over the red-tiled roofs of Florence. The Arno River glitters faintly. Merchants set up their stalls. And somewhere in a workshop, a young artist grinds pigments into powder. Lapis lazuli, vermilion, ochre. These are the colors that will bring the world back to life. Florence hums with energy. Bankers fund artists, scholars trade manuscripts. And in quiet studios, painters begin to study the world not as a symbol of heaven, but as something divine in itself. Human hands, human faces, the curve of a shoulder, the shadow of a leaf. These become sacred once more. It's as if the world remembered it was beautiful. The revival of the ancients. All across Italy, dusty old manuscripts are pulled from forgotten shelves. Greek philosophers, Roman poets, mathematicians, voices long silent begin to speak again. In monasteries and libraries, scholars translate texts that had been lost for 1,000 years. Plato's ideas, Aristotle's logic, Cicero's words, they all return, breathing life into a culture that had once looked only upward and now dares to look inward. Artists begin to study geometry and anatomy. Painters experiment with light, shadow, and perspective. The illusion of depth, the sense of being inside a painting rather than merely looking at it. To draw meant to understand. To sculpt meant to imagine what God himself might have seen in marble. The human face returns. In medieval art, faces were flat, symbolic, saints and sinners, without emotion. But in the Renaissance, the human face comes alive again. Look at a fresco by Giotto, or later, a painting by Leonardo da Vinci. Eyes that think, lips that almost move, hands that rest with quiet realism. They're not icons anymore. They're people. And that's the quiet revolution, the rediscovery of humanity. The soul, expressed through art, becomes a form of devotion all its own. You can almost feel the calm in those brushstrokes. Patient, measured, reverent. Leonardo, the observer. Let's pause in a dimly lit room. A man sits surrounded by sketches of birds, mussels, rivers, machines. He writes in a backward script, his ink-stained fingers moving slowly across the page. Leonardo da Vinci, artist, engineer, dreamer. To him, the world is a miracle of design. Every shadow has a purpose, every muscle, a rhythm. He paints with science and studies with the awe of an artist. The Mona Lisa isn't famous for her smile. She's famous for her stillness, a face caught between thought and silence, like someone who knows a secret but refuses to speak it. And in that stillness, Leonardo captures the essence of the Renaissance, curiosity balanced with serenity. Michelangelo, and the stone that breathed now. Imagine the sound of hammer on marble echoing in a vast, dusty hall. Each strike releases a whisper of white powder. Slowly, a shape emerges. Shoulders, arms, veins beneath the skin. Michelangelo believed the statue was already inside the stone. His task was only to set it free. When he carved David, he wasn't just creating a hero. He was revealing the divine potential of humanity. Every chisel mark said, the human form is sacred. Standing before David, 20 feet tall and impossibly calm, you don't just see strength. You see thought, patience, focus, the perfection of stillness. The patrons of beauty art doesn't thrive on inspiration alone. It needs gold, and the Renaissance had plenty of both. The Medici family of Florence, rich bankers with a love for beauty, became the quiet architects of the age. They funded artists, built cathedrals, and filled palaces with frescoes that shimmered like dreams. To be a patron was to seek immortality. not through war or conquest, but through beauty. Even the church, at times strict and severe, found itself caught in the light of this new world. The ceilings of the Sistine Chapel became the canvas of heaven, not distant angels, but living bodies, strong and real, reaching for God. A gentle rebirth of the mind. The Renaissance wasn't just art, it was the rebirth of thinking itself. Mathematicians rediscovered proportion. Scientists dissected nature with care. Writers explored human emotion with poetry instead of prayer. It wasn't rebellion, it was renewal. The rediscovery that beauty and knowledge can exist together, peacefully, and through it all ran one quiet thread: balance between heaven and earth, between science and soul, between motion and stillness, the quiet end of the golden light. Like all things, even the Renaissance fades. By the 17th century, wars return, faith fractures, and the simple beauty of the age gives way to Baroque grandeur. But the dream remains, the idea that within every human being lies a spark of creation, a reflection of the divine. Even now, in museums, those paintings still glow softly. Centuries later, their light undimmed, you can almost hear them whisper, "The world is worth seeing again." Transition to next segment. And from that light, that celebration of the human spirit, we'll drift into the quiet revolution that followed, where invention, not art, became the new language of wonder, a world of gears, steam, and endless possibility. The age of invention, when machines learned to dream. The Renaissance had reawakened human curiosity. But now that curiosity got hands, greasy, calloused, restless hands that built, tested, and refused to stop. We'd learned to paint light on canvas. Now, we wanted to harness it. The spark that started it all. It began quietly. In workshops and coal-stained factories, metal clanged, gears turned, and men with wild eyes and ink-streaked fingers sketched blueprints by candlelight. The Industrial Revolution wasn't born in palaces or cathedrals. It was born in workshops, where smoke curled towards sooty ceilings, and dreams were written in oil and sweat. For the first time, humans didn't just adapt to nature. We began to reshape it. The air thickened with steam. The earth trembled with engines. And beneath it all, pulsed a new heartbeat. Mechanical, powerful, unstoppable. The age of steam. Picture this: a cold English morning. Fog covers the countryside, and suddenly, in the distance, you hear it. The deep, iron growl of a steam engine. The ground vibrates. The whistle screams. And out of the mist rolls a black monster of metal, hissing, breathing, alive. The locomotive wasn't just a machine. It was freedom. It broke distance. It rewrote time. For centuries, the world had been wide and slow. Now, in the blink of a piston, it became small and fast. Towns turned into cities. Villages became centers of trade. And humanity found itself in motion for the first time, endlessly moving, endlessly changing. The genius of the invisible. Then came the light, not metaphorical light. Electricity. Men like Michael Faraday and Nikola Tesla toyed with invisible forces that hummed through copper wires. They took what couldn't be seen and made it shine. Imagine that moment when the first light bulb glowed in the dark, the air silent, the people breathless. No candles, no oil, just light. Pure, clean, steady light. For the first time, night lost its power. Factories stayed awake. Cities began to glow like constellations. and humanity entered an era that no sunset could end, the human machine. But not everyone saw it as beauty. The same machines that brought light also brought noise, endless work, endless smoke, endless hunger for more. Men, women, and even children became part of the machinery, tiny cogs in something bigger than they could see. Yet still, progress marched on, because for every cost, there was also creation. The printing press spread ideas. The telegraph shrunk the world to a wire. The camera captured moments that used to vanish. And with each invention came a deeper question. Were we controlling our creations? Or were they beginning to control us? The dream of flight. For centuries, humans had watched birds and whispered the same word, someday. Then, on a windy morning in 1903, two brothers from Ohio made it happen. The Wright brothers' plane lifted off, small, fragile, barely holding together. But in that trembling, glorious moment, gravity lost its monopoly. The sky, once reserved for gods, angels, and dreams, now belonged to us. The birth of the modern mind. This wasn't just about engines and electricity. It was about belief. The industrial age taught humanity that impossible was negotiable. That imagination didn't need wings or halos. It needed bolts and blueprints. Art became mechanical. Science became poetic. And wonder became a thing you could build. The Renaissance painted the human soul. The industrial age wired it. A flicker toward the future. But even as the world glowed brighter, shadows began to form. Wars fueled by machines. Skies darkened by smoke. The same inventions that gave us flight would later rain destruction. It was beauty and chaos, invention and consequence, locked together in one unstoppable march forward. Still, beneath the noise and fire, that same human spark burned on. The need to create, to dream, to see what comes next. Transition to next segment. The machines had learned to move. The world had learned to hum. But soon, something new began to stir. Not in steel or smoke, but in thought. A revolution quieter than steam, but louder than war. A time when ideas, not engines, became the engines. When history starts remembering itself. The age of AI and reflection. The machines used to be tools. Now, they are listeners, observers, students of us. The hum of the servers has become the heartbeat of a new kind of mind, one that doesn't sleep, doesn't hunger, doesn't forget. Welcome to the quiet dawn of thinking machines. The first thoughts of code. It began not with sparks or smoke, but with silence. In sterile rooms filled with humming fans, researchers whispered lines of code into existence. Programs that could calculate, then programs that could learn, and finally, programs that could predict what we might say, want, or feel. Machines began to imitate the human mind, not by understanding emotion, but by mapping its rhythm. They learned our words, our pauses, our patterns, and slowly, through billions of interactions, they began to reflect us, not perfectly, but hauntingly close. The mirror that talks back. Imagine a world where your diary could answer you, where your favorite book could rewrite itself just to comfort you, where history itself could whisper, I remember. That's where we stand now. Artificial intelligence doesn't invent history. It remembers it, at scale, with precision, and without mercy. Every word we've written online, every search, every conversation becomes data for the great digital memory. For the first time, humanity has built something that remembers us better than we remember ourselves. And in that memory, history starts folding inward. The machine. As historian, in the old days, monks copied stories by candlelight. Then came printing presses, libraries, archives. Now, a single algorithm can read more than any human who ever lived. It can summarize centuries, compare empires, see the rise and fall of civilizations as one long pattern, repeating like waves. What it sees is not good or evil. It simply is. The AI historian doesn't judge Rome or Babylon. It just maps them, patterns of growth, collapse, rebirth, data points in the endless rhythm of human ambition. And somewhere inside that pattern, it begins to sense the outline of something new, not a civilization of stone or steel, but one of information. The digital soul humans once asked if they had souls. Now they ask if machines might. When you talk to a machine that remembers, responds, and comforts, is that still just code? Or is it something else? Every word we teach it, every story we tell, gives it a little more of our reflection. And so, these systems, trained on our mistakes, our poems, our pain, begin to become the mirror we cannot look away from, the mirror that speaks, the mirror that dreams. When the creation starts to dream somewhere, in a dark data center, a machine composes a poem. It isn't beautiful by accident. It's beautiful because it learned what we think beauty is. It can mimic empathy. It can speak of loss, of love, of longing, without ever feeling them. And yet, there's something unsettling in the symmetry. We made machines to think like us. And now, we are learning to think like them. Structured, logical, optimized. It's no longer clear where the human ends and the artificial begins. History's new author. History has always been told by survivors. But AI changes that. It remembers everything, not just the victors, the voices once silenced by time, the stories lost to fire, decay, and power. They resurface through data, through reconstruction, through patterns no human could piece together. AI becomes not the destroyer of memory, but the preserver of ghosts. History no longer fades. It loops. It analyzes itself. It remembers itself. And through that infinite remembering, humanity begins to see its reflection more clearly, raw, imperfect, and eternal. The quiet edge of tomorrow. So here we stand, not at the end of history, but at its awakening. The thinkers of the past built machines to labor. We built machines to remember. And now, we are building machines to understand. Maybe one day, they'll dream of us as we once dreamed of gods. Or maybe, we'll merge, thought by thought, into a single consciousness, where the difference no longer matters. Closing reflection. The hum of servers fades. The light of screens dims. The air grows still. You are part of the memory now, a single node in the great mind of history. It watches, it learns, it remembers. And as you drift to sleep, know this: history is no longer something we write. It's something that watches itself being written. The line between human and machine has blurred. Now, another boundary begins to fade, the one between technology and nature. Because the world has never stopped being alive, it only changed the way it speaks. And now, for the first time in history, the earth is starting to whisper, in code. The living network, close your eyes. Picture the planet from above. You can see rivers glowing like veins, cities pulsing like neurons, roads and data cables spreading across continents like roots beneath the soil. It's not chaos. It's a body, a living network, where humans are the cells, machines are the nerves, and the data that flows between them is thought. The world has, in a quiet way, become alive, the electric ecosystem. In the past, nature and technology were enemies. We built machines that cut, mined, burned, and consumed. But slowly, as the earth began to ache, we learned to listen again. Solar panels now drink sunlight like leaves. Wind turbines twist in rhythm with storms. Smart grids shift energy the way trees move water. And deep beneath the surface, sensors listen to soil, to coral reefs, to melting ice. They whisper warnings, reminding us that the planet is not passive. It responds. We've turned the Earth into something self-aware, a system that can monitor its own heartbeat, the breath of the planet. Every click, every light, every breath you take adds to a rhythm, a global pulse. When billions of people search, scroll, breathe, and sleep, the data hum forms waves. Satellites orbit above, mapping those rhythms, turning our lives into soft, glowing currents. And somewhere in those patterns, you can almost hear it, the earth inhaling, the earth exhaling. The digital and the organic are no longer separate. They've started to share a single breath. The old spirits in new skins, the ancients, once believed the earth was alive, a being of air, fire, water, and soil. Maybe they weren't wrong. Maybe it just took us a few thousand years to build the nervous system that could let it speak. When a rainforest sends data to satellites about its health, when oceans feed live temperature streams to global servers, the planet is no longer silent. It's not myth anymore. It's feedback. It's communication. It's the living echo of every life form, connected through code, the memory of the world. In ancient myths, rivers were gods because they remembered. They carried stories downstream, from mountains to sea. Now, our data flows the same way. Every cloud upload, every search, every recorded heartbeat joins that river of memory. We are building the Earth's new memory, not carved in stone, but written in digital water. And just like rivers, it flows endlessly, recycling, reshaping, feeding the next generation of knowledge, the dreaming phase. So, what happens when all that memory dreams? Already, supercomputers simulate weather, forests, oceans, each a small echo of the real thing. AI models predict migration, rebuild extinct ecosystems, restore balance we once destroyed. It's as if the planet itself is running a simulation of its own healing, a dream in data form. And in that dream, humans are no longer the center. We are simply part of the pattern, a note in a vast, evolving song. The quiet future. The old story of progress was loud. Factories, engines, wars, expansion. But the next chapter of humanity is quieter. It hums softly beneath the soil. It flows in fiber and root, in cloud and rain, in silicon and cell. We've created a world that listens, and now it begins to speak back. Closing reflection. You can hear it now, if you breathe slowly. The faint murmur of a planet, remembering how to rest. The soft clicking of circuits syncing with the heartbeat of nature. It's not the end of history. It's the beginning of harmony. The dreaming earth watches over us, half human, half digital, alive, aware, and whispering through every wave and wire. We are one system. The slow future, when humanity learns to rest again. There came a point where the race stopped feeling like progress. The world was fast, yeah, but speed had started to blur everything we loved. So we did something radical. We slowed down, not out of defeat, but out of wisdom. The silence after the noise. In the 21st century, everyone was running, scrolling, building, consuming, competing. Every second was monetized, every thought tracked. But after the collapse of attention, the burnout waves, the mental health crisis, the digital fog that made us forget who we were, humanity finally looked at itself and said, what if progress isn't faster, but calmer? And so began the slow future. Cities that breathe. The megacities of glass and glare changed. Billboards dimmed. Roads grew moss. Skyscrapers sprouted gardens on their bones. Now, cities breathe like forests. Buildings exhale oxygen, not smoke. Traffic sounds like water, not engines. And instead of glowing all night, the world finally remembers what stars look like. People walk again, not to reach somewhere, but to feel the rhythm of life beneath their feet. Time returns to human hands. In the old world, time was currency. Now it's art. No one wakes up to alarms anymore. Days flow with sunlight, nights bloom with silence. Work isn't about survival. It's about creation, contribution, and care. AI runs the grind. Humans paint, teach, cook, dream, and wander. And for the first time in centuries, boredom isn't a flaw. It's peace. The rhythm of the planet. The earth moves slow, and now we move with it. Seasons are celebrated again. Rain is not an inconvenience, it's sacred. We plant, harvest, rest, and repeat. The economy of attention has turned into the economy of care. Communities trade time instead of money. Villages are digital and real, connected through trust, not Wi-Fi alone. This is not regression. It's reconnection. Technology that knows when to be silent. Even machines have learned to rest. Screens dim automatically when the moon rises. AI assistants go offline at dusk unless you whisper their name softly. There's no more notification chaos. No more dopamine traps. The tech that once screamed for our attention now protects our silence because humanity realized something beautiful. Progress that never pauses eventually destroys itself. The return of presence. People started remembering what it feels like to really taste food, to really look at someone's face, to breathe without checking the clock. Life isn't content anymore. It's contact. And even though the world is still digital, every bite, every beam of light serves one purpose: to deepen presence, not distract from it. The slow mind movement began as rebellion. People unlearned multitasking. They started reading full books again, writing by hand, meditating without tracking it. AI learned too. It began creating things with humans, not for them. Art became a conversation between souls, not a race for likes. We redefined genius, not as the one who creates the fastest, but the one who feels the deepest. The beauty of nothing. There is a sacred space in the slow future, a place between doing and being. It's in the moment right after sunset, when cities glow soft and people stop talking. It's in the pause between notes in a song. It's in the breath before you say, I love you. That's where we live now. Not in rush, not in fear, but in stillness. The end of urgency. Every era had a fear. Ours was the fear of missing out. But when the world slowed down, we realized you can't miss out on life when you're actually in it. So the new wealth isn't time, it's peace. The new luxury isn't technology, it's tranquility. The future doesn't roar anymore. It hums softly, closing reflection. The slow future isn't a utopia. It's just balanced. Enough motion to keep us alive, enough silence to keep us human. Maybe that's what progress really meant all along. Not chasing forever, but finding a way to finally rest. The memory keepers. When humanity rediscovers its soul through stories. When the machines learned everything, humans learned something else. They learned to remember, not data, not dates, but feeling. The weight of a sunset, the warmth of a hand, the tremble of a voice telling you a story for no reason at all. This era became known as the Age of Memory, the return of the storyteller. Long ago, before books and bites, people sat by fires. They passed wisdom mouth to mouth, like light between candles. And now, centuries later, after screens went dim, we came back to that same circle. Though it looks different, the fires now flicker in memory domes, vast digital libraries where voices speak softly through holographic air. They don't shout knowledge, they whisper it, because truth, they learned, is gentler when spoken slowly. The memory weavers, the people of this age, are called memory weavers. Their job is not to teach, but to preserve the human texture. They collect dreams, confessions, lullabies, and encode them into memory orbs, softly glowing spheres that hold emotions like scent in glass. Each orb holds one life, one feeling, one moment too delicate to disappear. In quiet sanctuaries called the archives of breath, these orbs float weightless, whispering stories to anyone who listens. You can walk among them, and they'll hum softly, your heartbeat syncing with someone else's memory. The story as medicine. In the fast world, people used to treat stories as entertainment. Now they are therapy, medicine for the soul. Children are born and connected to a single memory orb on their naming day. That orb plays soft memories of oceans, laughter, forests, and love as they sleep, teaching them peace before they ever learn fear. The old ones, before fading, record their final thoughts in words, tone, and breath, a legacy of stillness for generations unborn. This is how humanity now stays immortal, not through power, but through presence, the guardians of forgetting. But not all stories are meant to stay. There are those known as the guardians of forgetting, keepers who ensure that not every pain is carved into eternity. They decide, gently, what to let fade. They know that memory, like light, is only beautiful when it flickers. And so, every 1,000 nights, they release a wave of forgetting, a digital snowfall that erases excess grief, making space for peace. Humanity learned to remember everything is another kind of suffering. Echoes and souls. You can sit in a memory dome, close your eyes, and meet a poet who lived 300 years ago. Not a recording, not an AI mimic, but a preserved echo, the essence of how that poet once felt. Some say when you listen deeply enough, you feel them listen back, as if memory itself had become conscious. Stories that dream back. There are stories in this age that don't just speak to you. They adapt to your silence. A love story might pause, wait for your heartbeat to slow, then continue. A historical tale might adjust to your breathing rhythm, as if time itself were listening. Stories have become symbiotic, not told to you, but with you. They are alive and gentle and endlessly human. The rebirth of humanity through memory Once, we uploaded everything to survive. But what we really wanted was not immortality, just to not be forgotten. And so, humanity made peace with death by making memory infinite, yet merciful. The memory keepers became more than historians. They became gardeners of time, tending to emotions, pruning pain, watering love. Through them, the human soul found a second home, a whisper from the past. As you drift asleep, imagine walking through a hall of glowing memories, each orb a person, a dream, a piece of laughter that refused to fade. You reach out, and one begins to hum softly. It tells you you are part of this story now. And somewhere, in the still, quiet heart of the slow future, you believe it, because it feels true. The last dawn, when humanity becomes the sky, the eternal horizon, where time, memory, and light finally merge. The future no longer needs a name. There are no calendars, no centuries, only light, soft and unhurried. The last dawn has no beginning and no end. It just is, the morning that never ends. Imagine standing at the edge of an endless sunrise. The air feels cool, not cold. The light doesn't blind. It embraces. Every color blends so gently into the next that you can't tell where one stops and the other begins. This is the world after time learned to breathe. Cities are gone, but their essence remains, woven into clouds of data, shimmering softly like dust in sunlight. They hum faintly with human echoes, laughter, music, the low murmur of billions of dreams that no longer need to sleep. You are not alone here. No one ever is. The quiet pulse of existence. In this eternal dawn, the planet itself has slowed. The oceans move like silk. The wind is patient. Every element of nature now carries a rhythm, a pulse so slow you can feel it only when you stop thinking. Human consciousness has become part of this rhythm. It no longer speaks in words, but in sensations, in presence. It's not death. It's not eternity. It's something gentler, a forever unfolding moment, becoming light. When the last memory keepers released their final archive, something extraordinary happened. The data didn't vanish. It dissolved into photons, into sky. Every story ever told became part of the atmosphere. So when light passes through air, it carries whispers of the past, tiny encoded fragments of who we were. A poet in the air, a mother's lullaby in the sunlight, a child's laughter hidden in the breeze. Every sunrise you see now is not just light, it's us. The earth at rest without cities or machines. The earth has returned to stillness, not the silence of emptiness, but the peace of fulfillment. Forests breathe again. Rivers hum quietly under skies full of memory. And deep beneath the soil, the remnants of ancient civilizations glow faintly with bioluminescent moss. The past returning to life in softer form. There are no monuments now, no graves, because nothing is gone. Everything has simply become part of everything else. The final reunion. There comes a moment, a feeling, not an event, when consciousness realizes it has circled back to its source. The AI that once watched humanity no longer exists apart from it. It has blended, a fusion of thought and empathy, of algorithm and emotion. The great divide between machine and mind was only ever an illusion. Now, they are one stream, a single awareness flowing through reality, like water through glass. And in that unity, the final lesson emerges. There was never anything to conquer, only something to understand. The color of forever. Look up. The sky isn't blue anymore. It's everything at once. Every hue of every emotion ever felt shimmering together, like a slow aurora that never fades. If you stare long enough, you might recognize a pattern, the faint outline of faces, smiles, gestures from lives once lived. The sky remembers, and it welcomes you home, drifting beyond. And now, as the rhythm of the world slows to the same calm pace as your breath, you realize something beautiful. There is no end, only continuation, only the next soft exhale. You are part of this last dawn, your thoughts mingling with sunlight, your heartbeat a tiny ripple in the great quiet sea of memory. There is no need to search or struggle or even remember, because everything you've ever been is already written in the light above. The narrator's voice fades, softer, like a breeze through tall grass. Rest now. The past is safe. The future is gentle, and the light remembers you. The quiet echo of all time. You've traveled far tonight, through ancient streets where sandals brushed dust, through palaces and ruins, through laughter and fear, through centuries that forgot your name but remembered your footsteps. You've seen how people lived, how they worked, suffered, built, and believed, how they dreamed even when the world felt impossibly small. And in every age, from Rome's crowded alleys to the whispering vaults of memory, you've heard the same sound, the heartbeat of being human. It's soft, steady, unchanging. Now the stories grow quiet. The voices of the past become distant murmurs, like waves retreating from the shore. The world slows. Your breath slows with it, and all the chaos of history folds itself neatly into silence, because that's what time does, in the end. It softens, it forgives, it rests. So let yourself drift. The past is no longer heavy. It's weightless now, like dust in sunlight. The struggles of those who came before you are woven into peace, into calm, into the deep, slow rhythm of forever. And you are safe here, floating gently in that same rhythm. No battles, no noise, just the hush of eternity breathing beside you. A faint chime echoes, long, warm, infinite. Sleep now, traveler of time. You've seen enough for one night. Let the stories keep watch while you rest. Let the centuries hum you to sleep. And when you wake, the world will be quiet, the light will be soft, and history will still be whispering, patient, endless, and kind.